Okay, all right, there we go.
Hello, and welcome to CSW66, the Commission on the Status of Women. I am Tezkiah Gabriel, and I am the Executive Director of Pathways to Peace. We are so thrilled about this event. The Blue Carbon Initiatives, Advancing Women's Empowerment to Protect Coastal Ecosystems, presented by the Rotary EClub of World Peace, as represented by Mary Jo Larson as the event organizer. I'd just like to take a moment and recognize Katie Carr, the Pathways to Peace program and media coordinator, who is assisting with our technology today. It is our absolute honor to host this event. Before we begin, I will say a few words about Pathways to Peace. Pathways to Peace is a UN-designated peace messenger organization that holds consultative status with the UN Department of Global Communications, or DGC, and the UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. For over 40 years, Pathways to Peace has been engaged in innovation, collaboration, and movement building. Our vision is for a world at peace, and our work is about building a culture of peace. Pathways to Peace provides education, consultation, and mentorship. Working in partnership over the years, Pathways to Peace has inaugurated several UN-recognized global peace initiatives, including the United Nations International Day of Peace, which is celebrated around the world on September 21st, the UN Culture of Peace Resolution and Program of Action, and the Peace Wave heard around the world, which is a pause for a moment at noon in every time zone to be able to envision together peace. Pathways to Peace works in partnership with peace builders locally and globally on programs that build peace and eliminate barriers to peace, including nuclear disarmament, climate change, racial equity, and gender equality. Since its inception, Pathways to Peace has always honored, lifted up, and supported women's leadership. So we have always been present and engaged in CSW. In addition to CSW, on March 8th, Pathways to Peace launched its first Exceptional Women of Peace Award program. On September 12th, we will be recognizing 2 awardees, an Exceptional Woman of Peace and an Exceptional Young Woman of Peace. For more information, please go to our website, www.pathwaystopeace.org, and I'll put that in the chat, and look for that nomination form. It's a simple online form, and we hope that you'll nominate a woman or a young woman to receive that award. Pathways to Peace is an activated partnership with the Rotary and the Rotary EClub of World Peace. Today, and in a moment, we will be talking about ecosystems, which prompts the recognition that we are all perfectly connected. We are connected with all living things and with the planet herself. Those interconnections are so important. So when our planetary community fully embraces that knowledge, it changes everything. There is no separation between us and our Mother Earth. We are one. So with that, I would like to close my part of the welcome with my favorite quote from Lila Watson. And Lila says, "If you've come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you come because your liberation is bound to mine, then come and let us work together. And now it's my honor and my delight to turn the floor over to my colleague and today's event organizer, Mary Jo Larson from the Rotary EClub of World Peace. Mary Jo.
Thank you very much, Tez. That was inspiring and one of my favorite quotes now, thanks to you. And I think as we continue with our conversation about opportunities to fully engage in addressing climate change and the ecological challenges that we all face, your quote becomes even more vital because of the need to reach the most vulnerable communities possible. So to begin, I would like to first welcome everyone. I'm so excited to see some familiar faces and names there. And just a reminder that we will be addressing all 4 of the major themes for this forum. This is basically an NGO forum. So we'll be talking about climate change, the environment, disaster risk reduction, and of course, gender equality at the center of solutions. And to begin, I'd like to just give you an overview of our agenda, and then each of my colleagues, Alma and Monica and Kanodi, will have a chance to introduce themselves. So we'll spend about 15 or 20 minutes each discussing first, beginning with the overview of just the context for the climate crisis and focusing on coastal impacts. We'll talk about blue carbon and sustainability, and I'll show a short video of about 2 minutes. And then we'll begin to explore different types of opportunities and initiatives that are surfacing, involving so many different actors. And you'll notice we're trying to reach out and expand the scope of possible leadership, especially for women and girls. So to begin, we have the overview, and then we'll have case examples, and we're very fortunate to have Monica Kumar here, who has a depth of really concrete practical experience. So she'll be able to share some of her own initiatives to try to build up women's leadership, but also her exposure to, I would say, policy level discussions that will make a tremendous difference in terms of the health of our planet. And then we have MD Kanodi with us, and he is a professor, and he'll tell you more about that. But Kanodi is going to give a thoughtful analysis of his initial exploration of what is happening in a case study in Kenya. And then I'm delighted that Alma Abdulhalid Jadala is with us. I've known Alma for years, and I just, you can already see she has already started communicating with you, and she will build our interconnections and networks, help us to communicate as we proceed. So let's just go through a brief moment of introducing ourselves. So as I mentioned before, so my name is Mary Jo Larson, and basically my career was shaped by Peace Corps service. And most, I think the strongest impact on me was working with this combination of environment and education program in Asia and the Pacific, which took me into places like Kiribati and Samoa and Fiji. And throughout my career, I have returned to the analysis of the negotiations by small island nations, or my dissertation, or hosting events that really tried to bring together, and that's my dog, the countries that are dealing with adaptation, such as the Dutch, with the small island nations. I have served as a director of Gates Foundation Women's Leadership Program, so that is relevant to our gender equality theme. And I'm currently working with some sustainability specialists to really strengthen the disclosure, transparent disclosure of practices that have to do with sustainability and resilience. So that's my brief introduction. Monica?
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Mary Jo, for inviting me to participate in this excellent panel. Just as a quick background, I have worked in the space of sustainability for the past 20 years, and more recently, looking at green growth and blue economy solutions in the South Asia region. But also when COVID hit, I took the opportunity to invite my friends and colleagues and other sustainability professionals in the field to come together and look for solutions that we can take back to our organizations, addressing sustainability while living in a world where sustainability takes a backseat, right? During the COVID, during pandemic. And so we created an organization called the Sustainability Professionals for a Resilient Future. And it's essentially a forum, a safe space for us to come together, find challenges that we have in common, and try and seek solutions there. Right now, with the issue of sustainability and ESG and the growth that we're seeing in the interest from the investor community, this is a super exciting time to be in the in this landscape, because whereas most women 20 years ago were considered newbies, right now we are seeing quite a growth in the women leaders in leading the way towards a sustainable future. So I'll stop there and pass it back to you, Mary Jo.
Okay, thanks. Kinoti, please.
Hi, my name is Dr. Kinoti. I am a professor of nonprofit management at Regis University here in Denver, Colorado. And I've been the program director as well for that degree program for the last 12 years. Before that, I worked in different NGOs, including World Vision, Life Water International, and the United Methodist Church. And my focus has always been to have development that is co-owned and co-directed by people who it affects the most, especially in communities that are marginalized, and people who really are going to have to live with whatever pieces of development we put in place. In my teaching and in my research, I look a lot more at sustainability, not just of the intentions in the organizations, but also the sustainability of the mission and the ownership of development. And so besides that, I do evaluations of these programs, international programs, especially with different NGOs, and try to help them understand or look at how their work and their interventions are either leading to or holding back any kind of long-term sustainability. And so what we're going to be talking about today is in line with those kind of evaluations, assessments that are looking at a proposed program or an ongoing program, and how that is actually, how that embeds or does not embed the ideals of sustainability as we know them to be, both from a theoretical as well as a practical position. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kinoti. We're so pleased to have you. And Alma?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mary Jo. I'm also a Rotarian. My name is Dr. Alma Abdelhadi Jadala, and I teach part-time at the Carter School and an advisory board member. I have worked in conflict prevention and mitigation globally and served as an impartial third party on women, peace and security, and also security and development. Thank you, Mary Jo. Perhaps I'll take it from here and mention a little bit of the norms. Actually, we just would like, I see Kinoti had already put a request to be on mute when you're not participating, so we don't have any noise, because Zoom is a platform that we all have to manage successfully. We are hoping that this would be an interactive session with you. We'd like to hear from you. I will be supporting my colleagues through monitoring of the chat and the questions that you would be presenting. So please feel free to do that. I will also revert back to them with questions at the end of the session. We started a little bit late, so I'm going to ask my colleagues to move a little bit faster to make sure that we have the last 15 or 20 minutes at a minimum to share with you, to hear from you and engage with you with a Q&A. I think this is about it. You are all aware that the session is being recorded, so please be mindful of this. We're going to move now to hearing from you, and I believe Tess is going to, I'll take it back to Mary Jo to talk a little bit, and Tess will be putting up a survey so we can get your input. Please, as soon as you respond, make sure you hit submit, otherwise we won't tally the numbers on the screen. So please go ahead and start the survey.
Okay, so it looks as if Tess,
Yeah, it's already working, Mary Jo. We have one.
okay. But I would just say one word. I don't know if you can see the slide behind the survey, but basically the slide includes examples of different levels of work that we do on basically sustainable development goals. So those are examples that will help you to respond. If you are involved in many levels, let us know where your heart is. Where is it where you really get energized?
Okay.
Oh, and the panel will not vote.
Okay. It's very exciting to see your responses on the 3 dimensions. Okay. I have a feeling we're almost there. Please go ahead and submit. Make sure you've done submission for the poll. Okay. Mary Jo, I think we need to stop sharing. I'll just capture a picture. What is exciting about this poll is that our colleagues would reference it and revert back to it as soon as they're able to in their presentation. Okay, we still have some people coming in. Okay. Kinoti and Monica, are you seeing the same thing? I have a feeling everybody responded.
Yes, I can see the poll.
The responses, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So I think, Tess, if you could be kind enough to close the voting. I don't know if she can hear us.
It's already closed.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back to you, Mary Jo. Please go.
Okay, thank you very much. So actually I can still, let me see if I can close this poll. Okay. So no, I'm delighted to see the results. Almost 60% of you responded, and you can see a strong commitment to the community action and impact. And I guess as you look at this visual, that you know that to some extent tries to capture the dynamics of working in our field. Most of us were involved in some way in technical assistance, but it was interesting to see that you were either focusing upward at governance policies or committed at the community level, with most people at the community level. The real challenge for most of us has been trying to make the connection between governance policies and funding at the down at the levels where it's needed most. So that will be the focus of our conversation and our attention as we continue with our discussion today. As we move forward through the slides, the first thing I'm going to do is just cover just general context for climate and our discussions that are focusing primarily on the marine and coastal impacts. So I'm sure most of you are aware that we have increased ocean temperatures that are affecting, I was just listening to what is happening to the coral reefs, serious problems reported from Australia, and we are all monitoring changes in glaciers, sea level rise, coastal flooding and erosion, extreme storms. So from our perspective, the major community resilience questions that we're looking at, focusing on primarily community level, have to do with health and safety. Water is probably the major issue that we'll be concerned about. That's that water sanitation combination, which affects food security. Many of us have worked either with indigenous groups in North America or around the world, and of course, livelihoods and infrastructures. So I would say, as most of us do this research, we are discovering that contamination of drinking water is one of the major concerns that we're encountering. On the positive side, and I think most of us are semi-tracking this, because we know that reducing carbon emissions is crucial as a component in our struggle against climate change. Most of the emphasis has been to date on funding and partnerships that focus on mitigation. So I just wanted to recognize that technology is part of the solution, but actually our problem is not technology. But to begin on a positive note, there have been some amazing innovative breakthroughs. So the circle that you see is actually a floating solar array. So that is something that was developed in Norway. It's called the Ocean Sun. And on the right-hand side is one of the largest wind farms on Earth. It's in East Africa. And what I found appealing about that discovery when I was in Kenya was the level of stakeholder engagement that took place prior to finally installing these solar arrays. But there is an explicit link between the electricity that is generated and the communities that are in that area. So it has made tremendous improvements in storing medications, storage of food, access to education, et cetera. So there's a much more transparency and oversight taking place. You heard Monica mention ESG and the environment, social, and governance aspect. And of course, I mentioned that I've been working with people who are becoming quite sophisticated in overseeing the reporting that's taking place, the disclosures, to confirm and verify that actually we're not dealing with greenwashing. Okay, and then the third, down at the bottom, I just discovered this. These are solar arrays that are covering canals of water. So you may have heard about the droughts. Most of us in the United States have an awareness of serious droughts in southwestern United States, but the evaporation of water coming from the Colorado River, et cetera, is a major issue. So I think human ingenuity is really capable of solving many of these problems. In this case, the solar arrays are protecting the water. But what we're going to focus on today is really more of a nature-based approach to the climate crisis. So this would be being much more sensitive to the dual benefits of not only capturing carbon, but also adaptation benefits and then sustainable development benefits. So let's start with just simple coming together with an understanding of the definitions of these terms. So blue carbon is really a term, overarching term for any carbon that's captured by the world's oceans and marine coastal ecosystems. And so blue carbon habitats absorb about 40% of the CO2 emissions produced by human activities. Actually, the oceans absorb about 78%, but the habitats, the coastlines absorb about half of that. So there's a beautiful video that I want to show you. It's only 2 minutes long, but it will, let me take down my slides and just share this video with you. Okay, and let's see. Share screen again. And I'll have to ask, can you see? Whoop.
Ready, Joe?
Uh-huh.
Carbon is the carbon stored and sequestered in the soil and plants of coastal habitats, such as mangrove forests, seagrass meadows, or tidal salt marshes.
These coastal ecosystems are very special. They are helping us address climate change by removing carbon dioxide from the system and then locking it away in the soil below them.
These ecosystems can capture and hold carbon, acting as something called a carbon sink.
These ecosystems can store between 2 and 5 times and then up to 10 times the amount of carbon that a terrestrial tropical forest can. And all we have to do is make sure that we protect those ecosystems to keep that carbon locked away and not in the atmosphere causing climate change.
But we're losing these blue carbon ecosystems faster than we're losing any other ecosystem on the planet.
Mumbai's mangroves may be sacrificed.
This ecosystem is under threat.
Conservationists in Mombasa have raised the alarm over the wanton destruction of the mangrove forest.
Blue carbon ecosystems, such as mangrove forests, can protect communities against storm surge and sea level rise. In a study of developing countries subject to storms, mangroves are estimated to reduce the coastal areas impacted by storm surge by up to 50%. Mangroves are also a critical habitat for marine species, providing food and income for people, and they improve and maintain water quality along coastlines. So as carbon dioxide levels keep rising on our planet, it's essential that we protect and restore a key source that can save us all from a climate catastrophe: blue carbon.
Okay, thank you. Alma, while I'm doing this,
We already did that, Mary Jo. It's already in
did.
the chat.
pardon me?
We already have the link in the chat for the participants to look at it. So you-
Okay, okay, so you mentioned that the link to Conservation International is available?
yes,
Okay, thanks. Can you see, what do you see right now, please?
the blue carbon slide number 8.
Ah, okay. Oh, all right. So I need to expand that. It's hidden behind my chats and everything else. Here we go. Okay, all right, we're all set.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I hope that was a video that put everyone on the same page. I think, you know, it's a beautiful video, but it also, I think, is for me, it's a hopeful video. It gives us a sense of all of this attention to different segments of our planet. It goes back to the interrelationships that Tez was talking about. It's all so interrelated. So the benefits of looking at wetlands and capturing carbon, and the fact that the wetlands can capture carbon at a much faster rate than the forests is actually attracting not only attention to conservation and efforts to reclaim these wetlands, but it's also creating some innovation around, you know, how can we generate incentives for the market to support these initiatives. So just to recap, UN Environment Program actually has beautiful information on this topic, but with the benefits of the wetlands, when you see mangroves, you never really would imagine that. I don't know, some of you may have been kayaking near mangroves. I have, and my thoughts were, I hope no critters fall on me. I just, snakes, I just didn't know what was going to come out. But now I think I'll have a different view of mangroves, a greater appreciation. So they store carbon, they're protectors of our coastlines, they provide food security, of course. water filtration. It's a haven for wildlife. So, one of the main objectives of this session is to really just heighten your appreciation and interest in learning more about our coastlines. And the caution really that as people continue to be attracted to these beautiful sites along the coastline, was they tear down these mangroves and seagrass and other forms of carbon sequestration, they're really emitting tremendous amounts of carbon. Okay, so I just want to touch on the market incentives for protecting our coastlines. This is a picture that really shows kind of managed growth. So on the right hand side, you see a protected area that's a conservation area. It's protected in this case under state laws and federal laws in the United States. And if someone wants to buy property that's anywhere near the protected areas, it may be approved, but they have to pay money to actually reclaim land somewhere else. So I know of someone that bought 2 parcels of property and is paying $30,000 to make sure that an equivalent area is protected somewhere in this general conservation region. So, but to let you know, just in reference to the term blue carbon, you may hear about blue carbon credit or blue carbon trading. And basically, it's a market-based initiative that encourages the restoration and protection of wetlands. So industries, the private sector, companies, whether it's a hotel industry or the industry doesn't even have to be located near the coastline. They can buy blue carbon credits really under 2 scenarios. One is if they have a genuine commitment to reduce carbon footprints, they can just, a hotel could decide we're going to protect that whole area just to reduce our carbon footprint. It's a voluntary commitment. In many states, I think California is at the forefront of this with cap and trade. And you may hear more about it, but there's generally so far an emphasis on voluntary approaches to cap and trade. But in other countries, there are requirements to comply with emission caps. In that case, when the industry is going over the cap that is required, they can actually invest in situations like conservation and restoration of forest. And in this case, blue carbon means that it has to do with the coastline. So to sell blue carbon credits, landowners or municipalities can qualify, but the standards are high. So again, I know many people distrust the market in kind of the NGO community, but there's a very concerted and sophisticated effort to audit and manage these market trades. And a lot of NGOs are actually becoming involved in preparing business to report on what they're doing, but also to ensure that they engage stakeholders. So you must be able to demonstrate that you are restoring or conserving really high carbon absorbing wetlands, and you're meeting regulated standards, and those will be audited. Okay. So I'm going back to, it's just a common theme, I think, for the independent sector, and that is a skepticism about the private sector, business motivation, kind of a uncertainty about greenwashing. I myself come out of more of an environmental and then working with women's leadership for the Gates Foundation Health background. Most of my career has been with NGOs or working with some type of volunteer organization. For the past 12 years, I've been working with an organization that is completely concentrated on making sure that these sustainability initiatives are kind of marketed and regulated in a way that has multiple benefits. So the concept that I want to emphasize is many times people are motivated by not only self-interest, but genuine commitment. So why would business care to try to either voluntarily or honestly, authentically meet sustainability standards? So we'll start with incentives. There are zoning incentives, there are carbon credits. They are discovering that actually they're saving on energy. If they reduce their carbon footprint, they're saving money. And as they increase their efficiencies, they're discovering that they're also monitoring things so much more closely that they're reducing all types of risks, including the risks of communities reacting to their overuse of water or the toxins that they used to they didn't give as much attention to the waste of toxins in the past, whether it's for textiles or other industries. And of course, business cares because there is much more oversight of what they disclose in their annual reports, and their shareholders care. So there's much more pressure coming from shareholders. In addition, they actually have access to better terms when they try to borrow money because they can demonstrate that they're responsible. They have, when they have commitments to the sustainable development goals, you will see it in their annual reports. If you go on to any website, you will see a tremendous effort to make sure that the public understands that they are being responsible. And I think it's Generation Z that I was just reading. I have to remind myself what that really means, but that is the young professionals are, this last generation is the most conscientious and informed about monitoring the behavior of corporations and major companies more than any other generation in the past. And that's younger generations do influence their parents and grandparents, I don't mind saying. And overall, the benefits include brand reputation, building goodwill, and the loyalty of your employees. So I guess what I'm doing is trying to create more of an open-minded appreciation that the market, the business sector is actually driving many of the improvements in addressing climate change. Okay. So, and here, you know, I was looking at news articles. One of our colleagues, I'm also with the Carter School, and one of our colleagues, Michael Schenk, does a great job of circulating information. And I was thinking about what's happening along the coastlines, and this article just popped up March 15th, and it's really about natural habitat restoration. And the entire article was explaining that developers are finding so many benefits to restoring nature as a selling point. So number one, of course, there are zoning incentives. They can save money by doing this. But it's also, it protects their property when they're developing the coastlines. That's disaster risk reduction. They're finding they can actually make more money if they invest initially in creating parks or restoring with the seagrass and other natural vegetation along the coast, because people like the connectivity to nature. They love the nature parks. They like the views. They appreciate the biodiversity recovery, bird watching, every type of, they love just, I think it's just healthy mentally and spiritually, plus physically, to be outdoors and with nature. So there are so many health benefits. Anyway, so that was a New York Times article that I just popped in because it's really quite relevant. Anyway, so what we want to do next is move to Monica and then on to Kenodi to talk about, well, what does this really mean on the ground? So I've given kind of an overview as I close my section. I wanted to refer to this, it's called the Peace Compass. And this was developed by Ambassador John W. McDonald and Louis Diamond. The term is really multi-track diplomacy. I appreciate this because it helps us to move from just thinking of track one, governments, and track two when we think of solutions for climate change, but much more explicitly thinking about and appreciating, I'm not going to advocate for extremes of wealth, but when there are major foundations that are investing in climate, and there are major foundations, whether it's the Gates or Bloomberg, et cetera, or paying attention to religious commitments to climate, like religious groups actually buying shares in ExxonMobil and then influencing the agenda. But you just heard me try to heighten more awareness and open-mindedness around what's happening in the market. And perhaps my colleagues may want to comment about this as well. Kanoti, did you want to say something about the importance of track 5? Kanoti, I think you're muted. He may not. Anyone else who might want to comment?
I'll talk
Okay.
a little bit about track 3 in my notes. So,
Oh, that's great. Okay. And I would just add that actually for track 5, some of the best work that I've seen was at the University of South Pacific in Fiji, working with local villages, et cetera. So my last slide then is just a reminder. Oh, I seem to have lost one of my images, but that there are, as right now, many women who are taking leadership roles, whether it's with corporations like Indra Nuvi, who was chair and CEO with Pepsi, or you see in this corner, Yavi, she's from Senegal, and she was one of the first fisherwomen. We're missing someone named Hindu, and I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to the photo, but she was a youth leader who spoke at March 8th at the Women's International event. So, and in the middle there is someone that I've learned so much from, Xiaoping Tian, who was with us when we had the Women's Leadership Program. She worked with Indigenous groups. So at this stage, I'll be very pleased if there are, Alma, if you'll just check and let me know if there are any clarifying questions, and then we'll move on to Monica's presentation.
Monica, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
excellent. Let me put this in PowerPoint mode. So thank you for that. And this is very timely, right? We're talking about gender equality, and I'm going to focus a little bit about on sustainability and try to close the loop on carbon or blue economy and the role that women are playing there, or can also play there. So with that, I'm going to first talk about the survey question. In terms of who leads the way on sustainability efforts, are companies more likely to choose women or men to head their sustainability portfolios? And the results showed that 5 out of 9 said women. So 56% said women are more likely to lead the effort, and that is correct. There was a study recently in Greenbiz which showed that over time, women have been taking up the mantle in leading on sustainability. And here's another example of that. This is on the left, this is a survey done of female sustainability officers leading the way versus male chief technology officers. So as you can see, there are a lot more women leading the way on sustainability than there are even men leading on technology, which is considered a male-dominated sector. And the reason for this, as you know, as I've been trying to figure out what is driving women to be part of this, and it's, here's some skills that I've noted, like, you know, the ability to collaborate, and this is key because as I've moved from my sustainability role last year to the role on green growth and blue economy, I've noticed the change and shift in how we work. And I really prided myself in being a team player, team leader, a really collaborative model of creating solutions, because the challenges of sustainability are systemic. They really are based on the behavior of a person and changing the system overall. I'm sorry, there's a bit of an echo. So if anyone has their mic unmuted, please do mute yourself. And so that means that they're complex issues, and requiring somebody who has a long-term perspective and a perspective that really helps, really looks beyond a quick ego stroke to championing societal solutions and championing others. And I think these are the type of skills that women really bring there. I was sharing this with Mary Jo when we first started talking, but essentially in most of my meetings, especially on sustainability, the outlier are the men, right? So it would be 5 women and 1 guy there, and we would basically turn and say, okay, we need to be gender conscious here. So what do you say, right? So we have to be very conscious of including that male opinion, because we recognize that women are predominantly leading the way on sustainability. And I really want, partially I'm talking about sustainability, but at the same time, I want to focus a little bit on the blue economy and why and how really women are taking a lead or should be taking the lead, and what can we do, right? So it's not just about sustainability overall. And when I mean sustainability, I do talk about environmental, social, and economic perspectives, right? Because we really are living on one planet, but it's the interaction of society with our resources that create an economy. So we really are talking about all 3 tiers. And so when we look at, sorry, give me 1 second. I'm going to share this one more time because that bar was up there. All right, let's do this again. Perfect. Okay. So really, let's talk a little bit about the oceans and the ocean economy and how plastics play a role. And the reason I want to highlight this is because I'm going to make an indirect connection. We can be working on anything and you will realize that you're working on the blue economy or you're working on waste management. And these are 2 huge issues within sustainability. So pick a sector, pick any business that you might be working on. You may be working on coffee. Now, how you manage the beans, how you manage your farm, how you package them, has an impact on the oceans, has an impact on plastics. And this image shows you the very clear link. Really, we generate about 2 billion tons of waste annually, and 12% of that is plastic. Every minute, about a garbage truck's worth of plastic ends up in the ocean. So you might be working on coffee and you're like, nothing I do has really to do with the oceans. It does. Of course, the water intake is a huge part of it, but the other part is the packaging that you're using to transport that product to the market, right? And then what happens to that package? Where does it go? A lot of the time, depending on where you are, a lot of the time, we're told that the recycling plant sorts it. As somebody who's worked in the field, I can tell you that's not true. So you really need to dig for the answers of what happens to that plastic. That plastic not only ends up in the landfill or being burned, but a large majority of it is ending up in the oceans, like I mentioned. And that relates to adversely impacting tourism industry, fishery industry, has a huge human health issue with the release of mercury and dioxins. Really, plastic doesn't break down or doesn't degrade fully, right? So it breaks down into tiny nanoparticles, and whether that's in the land or in the oceans. And in the oceans, that basically is disrupting the plants from absorbing the chlorophyll. So it's having this adverse effect of creating more carbon rather than allowing the carbon to be absorbed into the oceans. And there is an estimate of the global damage to the marine ecosystem. It's costing us about $13 billion in cleanup operations and litter removal. And that's just one part of it. We haven't accounted for the cost to the tourism industry. But there are other elements too, right? So decrease in fish levels are also causing food insecurity issues. The polluted waters are also causing flooding, which then leads to more health issues in regions within countries where I work in South Asia. That's very clear, right? It's because of littering. So these are just some of the elements that we see because of something we don't always think about when we're working in our own sectors. And so I had mentioned in my introduction that I helped create this organization called Sustainability Professionals for a Resilient Future. And one of the first things we did was we created this framework for the future. I do not know why this is happening there. This frameworks for the future, and essentially we put out 5 key principles that anyone can adopt to implement sustainability. And the number 1 is reframing our relationship with the planet, which is quite self-explanatory, especially when we've been told the cost to nature is so great. And there's many studies out there that have quantified this. Same thing with prioritizing well-being and embracing diversity and confronting injustice. Going carbon neutral is a no-brainer, but redesigning our balance sheet really is what we need to do, especially if we continue to rely on creating capital solutions or capital market-based solutions. So with that, I just wanted to give a couple of examples of what women are doing in this field. And this is one of the solutions that was created by Jane in Indonesia, I believe this was, where instead of selling products in small sachets, right, small packets, they've created a reuse model where someone on a bicycle can come by and refill your bottle. So it eliminates plastic completely. You have your own bottle, you can buy a bottle from them, but they just come and refill it. So you can get a small amount if you can only afford a small amount, or you can get a bigger amount if you can afford that. That's one example. Here's another one. This is my sisters and I. We've created a company where we work with artisans in India to eliminate chemicals from textiles. And that has a huge impact on, the water use is a little greater to use these textiles, but essentially it eliminates the toxicity in water down the stream, right? Also, we are very conscious about how we package our materials. And we've done a couple of different things where we might, if we're getting a delivery in an Amazon box or something, we reuse that box. We don't use plastics as much as possible. Everything is reused as to the extent possible. We've also created solutions like reusable cutlery packs and so on. So helping others to adopt sustainable models. And our company's name is Icha, which means a wish in Hindi. And so our wish is for a sustainable future and a way to help other communities that we work with thrive along with our business. So what does it mean for you? In effect, you can have the same, apply these same perspectives in your own business, in your own sector, and that can mean anything, right? You can be an artisan or you can be working in fisheries. All you have to do is think about the life cycle, essentially, of plastic pollution, which will help you, and plastic pollution is just one element of it. As we said, it really has this great impact throughout the blue economy. But think about what are you using or doing within the extraction, where the resource is coming from, what does that impact? think about the production cycle. Essentially 6% of carbon emissions are coming from the production of plastic bottles and plastic materials, right? So we have to really look upstream to think about what is that production impact. In terms of point of sale, like how are things being delivered? In our case, in my company's case, we're shipping everything, and that has a huge carbon impact in itself, and we have to be aware of how we're addressing that. Then the issue of the waste, like what do people do once they get that package? Where do they chuck it, right? Can they recycle it, or can they reuse it in some model? And what happens to that if they have to chuck it? Like, is it really going to a dump, or is it being burned? But is there a way that we can take that product back and do something about it, right? So that's where the reuse models and the circular economy concepts are coming through. So this was just a quick thing to say, here are the types of questions you can ask when you're adopting sustainable models for yourself. All right, with that, I'm going to pass on to Kinori, I think.
Hi, Knodi, can you hear me?
Yes, and all right, I'm gonna share my screen real quick as well, and acknowledge my colleagues who've shared quite an amount of information here, but bring us back around to thinking about Arito about this, both from a theoretical as well as a practical perspective. So. Some of you have seen this diagram. It's shared widely, folks talking about community development and how things that we're trying to do really stay on, whether we're thinking about sustainability or the change in behavior or things that we want to be established as a way of development, that they stay on based on this pyramid. One, we have the top, which is we sometimes think as that's the driver. Often that's not really the case. The driver is in the bottom, which is a community action and community desires and needs. The governance on top is a policy development. And I think when we shared the survey at the beginning, we were trying to ask you where you are operating in these three levels. Most of you at the community action, from what I can tell, there is quite an amount of you who are working with governance and policies, and I assume, even though we are no one indicated they're working at the technical level, some of you who are involved maybe at the policy level, you're probably as well involved with providing technical support or technical know-how for these projects. The reason we're bringing this up here is, as we evaluate a case study that I'm going to be looking at in a moment, is to say, anytime you're thinking about development, anytime we're thinking about community development, including when we're talking about these blue carbon initiatives, we always have to have this matrix in mind, that sustainability for these projects, for moving us away from dependent on certain types of energies, especially strongly dependent, and where we're using more and more renewable energies. Those processes, something as big as that, or where we're really working towards mitigating climate change, most of these will take and last long term if they are based on a real good working relationship between these pieces within this pyramid. That there has to be very strong community action, and we're already seeing that from a variety of sources. There also has to be a huge amount of technical support. So folks who know what this is about, the scientists and others, are really working on specific mitigation processes, including the businesses and others. And then there's the government policies that really help to advance these ideas towards real sustainability. And the reason why we have to think about the meeting is as we talk about some of these things, we have to think about who is benefiting from all this. As Mary Jo said, we cannot rule out any of the folks that are touched by this, which means everyone, including businesses, governments, individuals, communities, villagers, and everyone else. And in a sense, that's where we have to start. And most of these programs are doing very well to incorporate as many as are concerned, as are touched by these initiatives, or even by what is happening in the climate change crisis. Our goals have to be broad enough to encompass all the pieces that we have to think about, because we do not have the luxury of choosing one over the other. Sometimes you hear the debate between the economy and climate change, or protecting the environment, or protecting our ecosystems. And I think that's a false narrative. It's a false dichotomy. We have to think about how these we can advance our economies as well as advance our environments. And there's countless number of examples around the world where this has been tried and it actually is working, where communities have come together with businesses, with governments, with NGOs, and are working towards processes that will help advance their economies, as well as bring about real change in terms of the things that they are working with that impact the climate and other other processes that are really degrading the environments in which they live. And then at that point that I would like to point out, as we think about sustainable ownerships, is time, the length that these processes need to take. Often we are sold very quick goals. You can achieve this within a very short amount of time. It's possible to, have technology take care of these problems. And as Mary Jo mentioned, technology is going to actually help. And my friend and colleague Monica has also pointed out, there are some areas where technology is helping very well. You can produce goods differently from how they are produced right now by using better research and development and figuring out what are some things that we can do here that will be different, and technology does help. But time is important. We cannot solve problems that we've created with 100 years of doing things in a certain way. We cannot expect to solve those in 2 years or in a year. And I think it's a misnomer when projects are sold to communities or even to governments that have a very short term type of projections on how quickly you can achieve these goals. Of course, we know any intervention, any mitigation is important if you started on it yesterday, especially if you are going down the wrong direction. So it's okay for us to push for ideas and ways of doing these things that will be beneficial for all concerned and have broad-based goals, and while recognizing that they will take time for us to get there, so that we're not waiting until when we are at the brink and then we think we can actually pull back as quickly as we would like to be. Now, I want to evaluate a case study or really look at something that is going on, what is called the Go Blue initiative in the Kenyan coast. Those of you who are familiar with the East African coast, Kenya has a huge part of that coast, and it's very well developed. I'll point some of that out in a moment, and connect how this project or this program, which is proposed to help mitigate some of the changes that are happening in that coastal region, are meant to help, at least at the point of where they can help pull back some of the damage that is being done to the coastal environments concerned. This is a 4-year project to protect the Kenyan coastal ecosystems. It is touted as being able to bring back environmental jobs, and I think it is actually going to do exactly that. I can see some of those. And the funding is coming from the European Union, especially 4 different countries that are providing technical support, France, Germany, Italy, and Portugal. It aligns very well with the United Nations Environmental Program and the UN Habitat. Those 2 organizations are charged with the responsibility to monitor the interventions for environmental conservation and urban planning. Now, my role in this and the reason why I'm evaluating this is really I'm coming at it from a technical evaluator. And I'm looking at the plans that this program has in place and saying, if I were hired, and I hope they hire me, so if anybody is on this call who knows someone at this organization, I'd like to work with them. If they hired me to do an evaluation of this project based on the 3 concepts that I just shared, there are certain things I see in their planning documents and in the memorandums that they have signed and all the documents that I reviewed that I have questions about, and I'll point those questions at the end. But this is the Go Blue initiative, and this is how it's designed to work. I also connect to this with where where women and the involvement of women in these projects are concerned in a moment. So this is what the program components are supposed to be. So first of all, it's Go Blue. It's that idea of protecting the coastal environments, as we have highlighted, that those environments are key to carbon sequestration and really bringing about economic urban coastal growth. There is the idea that jobs will be part of that equation. There is the security part of it, which is mostly because Kenya borders, some other countries that have poorer governments in terms of security, that there will be some level of developing the Coast Guard and the marine protection and protecting that territory overall. And then there's all the ideas around mainstreaming conservation and sustainability being a part of that in terms of how you do the fishing, how you do the development of the hotels and the processes there in that region. So these are the main components of the program as it's dreamed up to be. I must also mention that I'm not directly involved in this, so I'm evaluating it from a distance that I don't have all the details to say any of these things or in place in the ways that I see them or I would expect them to be. This is the Kenyan coastal region. It's covering 4 counties. It's an integrated land approach. They are working together from the county governments to manage this. It's also being run with a hub that is called the Go Blue Initiative Hub. The idea is that they will share information from that hub to as many other marine coastlines around the world based on what they develop out of this process. And we have to talk about this coast of the coast of Kenya and what is there already. This is one of the most developed coastline if you think about tourism, hotels, and other programs that we could in terms of economics we can point to. Unfortunately, over the years, this particular coastline has actually been a place where big money plays and a lot of hotels, a lot of resorts in this region. So here's some area to redevelop, to protect, but I would almost say it's not that much. It's probably 50% of that coastline is already taken. And this is what you typically get to see if you travel in that region. I was there in June last year and stayed in this place. And I know very clearly that more and more hotels and resorts chains have bought land and are trying to develop these kind of facilities. So even with the perspective of this program coming into being, there's quite some questions on how much of that protection is long overdue and may not actually work even to the level that they are expecting. There are some places that are open and where local communities have been engaged in either their own local initiatives or some NGOs involved in planting either the mangroves. This is one area that around Kilifi where they're planting mangroves to kind of do what we are talking about in this talk, which is capture the help to capture the carbon and sequester that so that there is not continued and destruction. I have a few questions that when I review this program, especially when I review the EU Kenya government initiative, the Go Blue initiative, some of my questions that come to the top is this a top-down planning process? If you go on their website, you see most of it is really run from the county government, for the national government, as well as the embassies. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a question, how much of the community, if you remember our pyramid, how much of the community action is involved in this project? Because we know very clearly from all studies, theoretical and practical, we know that sustainability of these projects depend on the engagement of all those that will be impacted by these programs long-term. How many of the hotels that own property in this region were involved in the planning? How many of the communities who have waterfront properties were consulted while they developed these programs? I couldn't find that information. And if I were to go deeper into the evaluation, these are some of the questions I'll be asking. Is this external funding only, or is there engagement by the Kenyan government, by the local counties, by local communities in that fund, so that we're not just working with money that is coming from the outside, and when that money is done, that this is going to be gone? The communities are actually able to develop their own resources, and they can continue to maintain and support the sustainability of the blue carbon economies that they have started in this region. And then the technical support, I could not find anything in this program that indicated there was local or national or regional technical involvement in this project. I think all the technical support is coming from Europe. I know there is probably quite some developed technical expertise in that region, but I cannot see it. I don't know that it's being involved in this. And if I were to come back to this project, it's actually a 4-year project. If I also come back to do an end of program evaluation, some of these questions, I would have to bring them up. How much of the local community expertise was involved here? And then the most glaring issue for me in this program, and the reason why Mary Jo invited me to present it here, is there's a glaring lack of women involvement in this project. You only see 4 women out of the 16 leaders of the project. You only see 4 women. And those 4 women are all heads of missions for France, I believe, for a few of the countries from Europe. There is no woman from the local, from the Kenyan side, whether it's from the governor's offices or from other places. Now, I did write to them and ask for information on how much of this project was designed by women or with women at the table. And I did not get any responses back. But but just looking at the leadership that is posted on the website, there is no local women leadership there. Now, if we believe in a program like this, that is 50% touching a community with 50% women, why would we not have them in the planning process? One other question that I have, so I would have a very strong question for them there about how are they making sure that women are going to be involved, not just at the level of they're going to benefit from what will come about, but how are they going to be involved in creating businesses? How are they going to be involved at the level of managing this, monitoring it, and benefiting from it overall? And then finally, the monitoring and the ownership. For me, the long-term sustainability of this project is questionable. I have my own doubts. It's a 4-year project. How much can you really achieve in a 4-year duration? I'm not doubting it. I believe it's needed. I believe it's going to be here, and it's an important step into the process. But I would like to ask the questions as an evaluator. I would like to ask the questions, how much of this is just, we're going to pump the 25 million euros and then walk away, and this is not going to be replicated for the future. So that's the Go Blue initiative in Kenya. And I have to remind you again that the reason why I am asking these questions is I'm looking at this from an evaluation but standpoint. I'm looking at it from that pyramid of the policies, the technical support, and the community action. And I see a lot of involvement at the top of the policies, and maybe some technical expertise from the outside. I see very little community action, unless you're calling the county governors, the politicians on the ground as the community action. But I would like to see more ownership at the level of where communities are impacted and are involved. And I would like to see that community involvement really be strongly women, because my experience in community development and in evaluation of these programs tells me that the majority of what remains on the ground after all these programs are done, whether by NGOs or by governments, are what the local people are going to own and operate. And that strong part, if we believe what Monica has just shown us, that the majority of the folks that are involved in sustainability efforts are women, then we need to see that replicated also in programs like this, especially at the community action level. I will hand this back over.
Dr. Kinoti, could you leave the slide up for us, please? So we can use the next 7 minutes to kind of give a chance for our listeners to reflect on these types of questions. I'd like to go back maybe to Monica and see if she'd like to add any comments, particularly on the limited gender diversity that Dr. Kinoti mentioned. Would you like to add something, Monica? I know you're on the phone due to technical issues. We're talking about the slide that reads Case Study Go Blue Initiatives in Kenya. Please go ahead. I don't think she can hear me. Mary Jo, in the meantime, would you like to comment on the questions a little bit more?
Sure. No, thanks, Alma. And that's true. Monica did let us know that I couldn't even tell, actually. She was communicating by phone. But on the limited gender diversity, as I think of Kinoti's analysis of this, it's really a pilot project, isn't it? It's almost to try to develop the practices and the systems and the milestones, every aspect of strategic planning that may be replicated in other areas. So first off, I'll respond by saying you raised so many issues that I'm almost jumping from in my head from one to the other. One is it's a 4-year project, but it's a new project. And I can tell already from the lack of information that the groundwork, the capacity building at local levels, the engagement of whether it's local community leaders, school committees, I mean, the search for community representation is not obvious when you go to public resources. So from my experience with the private sector, what's happening that I think has tremendous potential for NGOs and projects that are funded with quite a substantial amount of money by, say, the European donors, is the benefit of requiring much more transparent public access to what are the strategies, what are the milestones, what are the commitments, and how are you making progress? Or using the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, to say, this project was set up to reach these particular objectives. And here are the commitments from local hotels. Here are the commitments from the local municipality. In other words, what I'm trying to point out is, including with gender diversity, it's almost as if the tail wags the dog, if that expression is familiar to anyone. What you set up in your evaluation systems will influence the way the practices and the implementation that takes place over the life cycle of the project. Of course, I'm really a believer in much more of a developmental approach to evaluation, but so I'll close with just one reference back to the third question, which was what percentage of land is owned by females?
We have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Oh, I'll stop there. It's just, I think it influences the question, the whole gender diversity challenge. Because this is actually a hyper political project. Because all of that land is very valuable. So if you're trying to protect it, there's a lot of competition for beautiful areas, and communities don't have access to the clubs like the one Kinoti just mentioned. So I'll stop.
Okay, Kinoti, what would you like to have our audience leave with, just in a very short sentence?
I think one, it's the fact that when we see these projects, we know that they're important and they are actually meant to deliver something. They're putting them in place. Whoever is putting them in place, including ourselves, we're putting them in place because we believe they should help us as a society to mitigate all the issues we've talked about of climate change and job growth and all those sort of things, well-being of our society and communities. So I think it's, as Mary Jo said, we ought to demand a little more transparency in these projects. I'm not sure that the European Union is, or anyone else is required to put all their materials out there, but I would at least like to see them be a little more open, especially on how they came to this point and in the things that they hope to achieve out of them, and how they will involve the local communities more, because we know projects that are driven from the outside will probably not, they'll do some work, but they are not the most sustainable in the long term. So I would say those are the questions we need to be asking. It's many of these questions on this list and others as well, even as we work with other people.
Thank you, Kinoti. Monica is unable to speak to us directly. I asked her what she would like to communicate back to you, and she said there is low participation on the governance level because women are dealing with day-to-day issues, and unless it helps them put food on the table, and the types of indicators adopted by international organizations to address this disparity. Mary Jo, any very brief sentence, so we turn it back to Tess, and then in closing.
You would like a brief sentence from me in closing?
No,
Okay, I'll be happy to give you a brief sentence. Okay.
I meant, what would you like them to leave with? Just a very brief sentence.
I promise it'll be brief.
Okay.
So I'd like to hit on the subject of resilience. I read something recently that I like very much. So, we've talked about resilience as the ability to recover or to bounce back. But I think when I look at these blue carbon initiatives and sustainability initiatives, I love the concept of bouncing forward. In other words, taking advantage of this cohesive interest internationally in addressing all types of interrelated ecological issues. Funding is coming through, business sector is involved, and just being determined to engage many more individuals who are focused on the equity and inclusion and sustainability issue at the community level. So bouncing forward on these initiatives. Okay.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Kinoti. Tess, I know you are ready to, same way you opened with these beautiful words and inspiration around peace and community, and also the role of women. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Tess? Oh, Tess?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Please speak. She can't hear us.
Okay. Kinoti, she needs her slide and then she'll know it's her turn.
In closing,
slides?
Yes, please.
I would just like to thank Mary Jo and these extraordinary speakers for giving for giving us this essential information, and for deepening our partnership between Pathways to Peace, the Rotary EClub, and the Rotary EClub of World Peace, and with each of you. At Pathways to Peace, we want you to know that wherever you are and wherever your heart leads you, whatever your background or your work in the world, you are a pathway to peace. And we know as peace builders that we bring peace to our world through living peace in our lives. By simply anchoring peace in our hearts, our light shines out and it touches and changes everything. So we at Pathways to Peace hope that the amazing presentations today have inspired you to first recognize the importance of those interconnections, this world of ecosystems that we are a part of. We hope that you are inspired to take action in whatever way your heart moves you. And we hope that you'll continue to make peace a lived reality. So from the bottom of our collective heart, we thank you for attending. We thank our presenters, the excellent presenters, for the information shared. And we look forward to joining you in your efforts for peace. Thank you.